This video summarizes the complete process of custom building the Das Werk 1/16 German Halftrack. Full building and assembly of the vehicle might not be shown. The plastic front fenders were to be thinned out and bended to make it look more like dented metal plates. This kit comes with great details, including most of the welding joint details, but does miss out a few that needed to be addressed. Some piping and fastening details were added to the fuel tank. There were no wiring parts provided in the kits, so I had to introduce some wiring details attached to the engine parts based on the actual photos. I have to stress that I took some artistic licenses to allocate these wires, so some of their arrangement might not be accurate, but I think it is just fine to add realism. The bracket details from the armor plates to the chassis were missing, as I wanted to open up the internal decks to display the lower portion of the vehicles. These details are essential to be present. They were made with brass parts and plastic bolt parts, and later added to the position. There are quite a lot of parts in this kit. The painting is tricky with this kit, as a lot of the internal parts had to be painted and weathered before they were concealed by the outer pieces. The internal chassis areas were painted with oxide red color and sealed off. The rest of the vehicle was painted with Tamiya XF88 dark yellow too and sealed with semi-gloss varnish. Shading effect was added to the color parts. Earth tone pigment was used to add the dust buildup on the internal parts. Grease stain was also added to the connection areas. I used both MIGs and Tamiya black panel liner solution. The engine block was highlighted with gunmetal pigment. All internal parts were color and weathered now, they were carefully placed and glued. The driver area floor plate was to be left detachable for displaying the details below. The steering mechanism in the kit did not have any locking devices in the joint. I drilled holes and added pins to make them secured and workable. More wirings were added after the parts were in place. There were quite a few wires behind the dash panel and the real thing. I used some fine electrical wires to replicate that. I also added some bracket details to hold the wires. I used some old spare parts to make the missing control lever details. More shading was done to the assembled engine bay. The base plate was left unattached till I finished all the internal detailings to make sure the access was possible. The rifle was painted with oil paint and dragged to create the desired wood grains. I used the lead strips to create the MP40 straps. The guns were highlighted with Mr. Color metal iron. The hinges in the kit were not workable, so I drilled holes and put thin wires through to make them workable. Now that is working, but the plastic was too fragile, so it broke and I had to remake some of the hinges with brass again. The rear door hinges were made the same way. The inside of the hood structure was painted with Tamiya black panel liner and washed with white spirit to mimic the grease and dirt accumulation. The chippings on the interior had to be done before attaching the top armor plate structure. AK streaking grime was used in the streaking effect with white spirit washing. The chippings on the floor plate was achieved with using sponge with black enamel paint. Graphite pencil was used to highlight the worn edges on the metal plate. The transformer to the radio was missing in the kit and I had to make one from scratch. After all the parts in the engine bay were completed, the front hood could be placed with the radio assembly. The radio headphone with the mic or scratch built. I made the wires curled up and hung around the hook that I made on the radio. Added the wiring and junction box to the antenna. Some chippings on the heavy used areas. The wood handles of the tool was painted the same way as the rifles. For the wood benches, I used acrylic paint as it dries faster and more durable for figures to be seated on. It was sprayed with flat black to darken up the tone to worn look. The camouflage pattern used dark yellow as background with light green curve lines. The numbers were painted by hand as the decal was always hard to blend in with the body. The white background was painted first and the black silhouette was carefully painted by hand. After sprayed with semi-gloss varnish, the black panel liner was applied. The chippings now applied to the remaining body of the Halftrack. The final step was to apply the rust-grime streakings. The streaking effect was further enhanced with spray paint. I added a tiny chain tie detail to the side storage locking device. The mud and dirt accumulation on the underside was first created with earth tone pigment and adhered with acrylic thinner. A darker tone pigment was applied the second time to suggest various moisture of the mud accumulations. The mud on the tracks was applied with pigment binder and mixed color pigment. The wheels were weathered the same way as the underside of the vehicle. Spare tracks were attached to the front as an extra protection at the time. The kit unfortunately did not provide any figures. I had to use a Tamiya figure to convert to the gunner. Another one that had to modify his legs to fit the benches. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel. You can also visit my web store for more information on my works.